Welcome back. David Penn here. This is the Professor Penn podcast. Good evening to you on August 20th, 7:30 p.m. Central Time. This is the 136th Professor Penn podcast. The title of this one is Interview. That's right, Interview. You notice we're in a different setting today because I have in studio with me Maureen Bannon. Isn't that cool for the Professor Penn audience? Wow. How you like that? Hi, Maureen. Welcome. Good morning.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's fun, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we got this thing going. It's the first. This is the first interview we've done on the Professor Penn podcast.
Well, now I feel really special.
Well, I feel like, well, this is great. No script today. 135 straight episodes of study and toil, and now we just get to hang out and enjoy each other's company and talk about the things that we think are important. Good morning, Tanner. How you doing? Tanner's not mic'd in here yet, so we're going to have to get Tanner mic'd in this set also. But Maureen came to Minneapolis. She's coming frequently, and I'm thinking about that. What does that mean to me? Maureen thinks I'm going to go right, but I'm actually going to go in a different direction. She figures I'm going right for the hoop. Now, actually, Maureen, what's great about having you here is your father really brought me into this movement. And not because of War Room, because in 2016, he was the chief strategist. Was that not his title in the first Trump administration?
It was.
Were you spending any time in the White House in those days, or were you still kicking dirt someplace around the world?
So I was still in the Army. However, I was actually considering getting out at the time. I didn't end up getting out until 2019, but I was thinking about it way back then because I saw the trajectory of the military at that point already. And I wanted to go to nursing school. So my mom came back into town to visit and we went to go look at GW nursing school. And both of us went and had lunch in the West Wing with my dad and
Oh.
got to see where he worked. I did go visit a few other times, but that was one of the times I really remember.
So nursing, where does that come from? I mean, is there somebody in your family who's I mean, where did the image come to become a nurse? Where did you get that?
So I had friends when I was in the Army whose wives were nurses, and I was friends with the wives. Um, and, I just kind of got a passion for it, and I actually wanted to be a neonatal intensive care unit nurse. So, I've always had, a love for children, and I'm one of 15 grandkids on my dad's side. So, I was always around kids growing up, and my family calls me the baby whisperer because I'm able to hold my family members' kids or my friends' kids, and they'll, like, fall asleep or stop
The
crying.
baby whisperer. Oh,
Mhm.
I got it.
But, that's where it really came from. I knew at the time, just hearing stories that they would tell, that's something that I developed a passion for, and then given that love for children, I was like, "Okay, the NICU sounds amazing." I mean, obviously not because it's sick kids in the NICU, but I can help people that can't help themselves because they can't even speak for themselves. But then in 2020, when COVID hit and then all of the election fraud, my passion that had been laying dormant in me for politics, that just
Exploded.
uh-huh, and then nursing was like, "Okay, I don't think this is the right career path for me. I think politics is where I need to be."
I have a similar story. I my audience knows this. I don't think I really delved into the story with you, but I went to China. I mean, I was doing business in China in 1993. So I mean, that wasn't the first wave,
Mhm,
but that was the very lucrative wave before the Chinese really knew what they were doing.
mhm.
They were actually quite friendly at that time. There was something they wanted, which was our technology and our worldview. So, I mean, I had a great time. I mean, I really enjoyed China, and you would have to say I was a globalist. I was a globalist in my business career. and I was a globalist in my political orientation. I mean, almost extremely so. I didn't know it because
Yeah.
at the time,
Mhm.
that was normal, right? I mean, it wasn't
Yeah.
abnormal to think only about yourself and how much money you could make and just ignore everything else that was going on. But there's something that we have a mechanism in our legal framework to protect local industry. It's called anti-dumping. It's trade cases. There's a trade administration.
Mhm.
It's in the Department of Commerce. It's the International Trade Administration. And interested parties that have standing can bring lawsuits, or they're like lawsuits. It's what they call quasi-judicial.
Mhm.
In other words, it looks like it's legal, but it's not. Very political, and you can bring an action. That's a better way to say it. And you can say this industry, my industry, is threatened by imports from this country. They're dumping things below a concept that they call less than fair market value, whatever that means.
Mhm.
Because what's fair market? What's fair to you is not necessarily fair
Fair.
to me,
Yeah.
right? They're breaking the rules. What rules? Oh, the WTO. The WTO has got a set of rules. World Trade Organization has a set of rules.
Mhm.
There are countries that join the WTO just to learn those rules with the intent of breaking them. You see, this is us, right? This is us. People want to be nurses and take care of sick babies.
Mhm.
We have kind of a do unto others as we want to be done unto us.
Mhm.
Honesty is very important in our culture. Liars are marginalized. Probably why you didn't want to get into politics. Lying. Don't like it. But you run into these groups of folks, and I'm not saying they're bad people. I'm just saying they got a different rule book.
Mhm.
And the rule book is you can take your rules and stick it where the sun don't shine. We're writing the rules, and here's what the rule is. It's only illegal if we get caught. And that's the way our trade policy has been since, forever, right? Since
Mhm.
forever. Since slavery. So I had this globalist orientation, and I went to these trade actions because the industry I'm in, the tire business. Oh, this is my trolls too. I got these trolls that go, I'm just a tire salesman. If they only knew what kind of tire salesman I was. I just look at it. They actually say, oh, but like I'm play acting as a professor, and I'm just a tire salesman,
Well,
right?
I have some that say I couldn't get a job in the real world, so my daddy had to give me a job. That's why I'm CEO of War Room.
Right.
Not that I earned it, not that I was in the military, worked in a
Wait,
civilian
wait, slow
company,
down, slow down,
and
slow down, Maureen. Just tell everybody. And what year were you admitted to West Point? What year was that?
I started at West Point in 2006,
Okay, and what year did you graduate?
2010.
Okay, so folks, whatever you want to say about our military and its posture, the individual members are brave. And to get into West Point and to graduate from there is one of the highest accomplishments in our society. It would make you an elite, actually. You would you
It
would be, yes,
was.
you're an elite. You're an elite. They probably have a secret handshake. They can probably see each other from
No,
50
they
paces.
actually
They do, don't they?
no,
Yeah, you
no,
do.
but we
Tell the truth.
no, but we our class rings, which I do not wear my class ring. They call West Pointers ring knockers because they would wear their rings and just, like, knock it on tables and
And
things
if
like
you
that.
turn that ring, does it like light come out of it or something
No, I
special, like a
know.
laser?
No.
Like a cartoon.
No.
What was that cartoon? Yeah.
I haven't worn my class ring since, like, 2013, and I would only wear it for special occasions, even when I got promoted to captain, so
Oh, you're a captain.
no,
So these people that are trolling you obviously don't really know what this means, do
no,
they?
no, and I get it, my dad calls me Captain Bannon still, and
He's
I'm
proud of you.
I'm not technically a captain, I mean, I got out in 2019, but, um, when I got promoted to captain, one of my mentors, who happens to be a retired general, lieutenant general in the Army and was when he retired, he was superintendent of West Point, and usually you do 4 years at West Point as superintendent, but he got a waiver to do 5 years, so he's extra special. Amazing gentleman, love General Caslin and his wife Shelley, but he promoted me to captain. And everyone was like, "Oh my gosh, where's your class ring? Where's your class ring? Like, why aren't you wearing it?" And I said, "I don't want to. I'm not a ring knocker. Like, I don't need to flaunt that I went to West Point. I don't need to have that." We've already had my promotion ceremony because I had a 3-star general promote me to captain was already big enough. It was supposed to be like under the radar while he was on leave. That was the plan. While he was on leave, he was just gonna come when I was stationed at Fort Lee and do the promotion ceremony. The commanding general of Fort Lee was a 2-star general, didn't wanna meet with him. All of a sudden, like the day before, the Army Logistics University where I was there for a course, I see them ripping out plants from the front to plant new plants because a 3-star general is coming down to their installation. Then the commanding general of Fort Lee wants to meet with them. It became like this huge thing, and you want me to wear a ring to prove like, to show I went to West Point? I
I still think there's a secret handshake.
there's not, but you we don't need to knock the ring.
So this
It's
General
like,
Caslin,
kiss the ring, kiss the ring.
General Caslin, that's your did I hear you right? Did you say he was a mentor?
Mhm.
What and he had an extended tenure at the at
Yeah, so
West Point, which
s
is unusual.
s
Can you just share a little bit about what made this man a mentor and then made him such a unusually strong leader at West Point?
so when I was a cadet, he was the commandant of cadets my freshman and most of my sophomore year, which is a 1-star general position. So that you have the at West Point, you have the dean of students, which is a 1-star general position, the commandant of cadets, which is a 1-star general position, and then the superintendent, which is a 3-star general position. So he was the commandant of cadets, and I struggled academically. I earned my starting spot on the volleyball team at West Point 4 matches into the season and started I earned it every year, but started from that point on through when I graduated or the end of my senior season. Um, I would go back to my room and instead of doing a thorough job on my homework, I would do my homework and then study film. So I struggled very much academically. So when you don't do the best academically or you fail a class, which I might have done my freshman year, first semester, you're basically your academic file goes to the academic board, which consists of the dean of students, um, and then I believe the commandant and the superintendent are on the board as well. And I had one the department head gets their determining, like, keeper or kicker out from the teacher that failed you. So that teacher said, "Kick her out. She doesn't deserve to be here." And the dean of students, the commandant, and the superintendent at the time,
Was there a little personal interaction going on between you and this teacher?
that teacher tried out for the soccer team when he was a cadet and did not make it. So he did not like athletes. Um, so I think and he didn't like women. So he was misogynist, and that became very evident when I especially to my parents when we were out at breakfast one time and he pointed at me and then started yelling at his wife. He was talking about me and then I guess she said something and he started yelling at her to
Publicly.
where the whole restaurant got silent. Um, so it was clear that he was a misogynist. So the fact that I was a athlete, a female athlete was just a negative against me. The paper that he gave me like a D on, I had another officer read and she said it was like a B paper. She would have given it a B. He gave me a D. And then
Can
I
I ask what the subject was of this class? Is that
world history. So the fact that I'm Steve Bannon's daughter and we went over US history and world history from the time I could read up until I went to West Point. I should not have failed world history. So
You
that
mean your view of world history failed?
um
There might have been some of that going on,
well, the
right?
fact that I was a female and an athlete and missed some class might have played a part too. He just didn't he told me after I turned that paper in, "Take a look around. This is your one and only semester at West Point." So I knew at that point you had a vendetta against me.
Wow, that's awful.
And I spoke up, but because it was me, he said, she said, who's gonna believe a cadet over
Although although, for those of the audience that have never experienced anything like this, when you hang around with these kind of people,
mhm.
we believe in
Well,
loving our neighbor
ca
as ourselves, but this is a Darwinian environment, wouldn't
Ka
you say?
karma came back to get him because he got looked over for promotion twice at a higher rank for a higher rank,
Yeah.
um, years later, and he got his 15 minutes of fame. He went on and blamed my mentor for his lack of promotion.
Well, are you kidding
No,
me? Oh, that's great.
but, so when I went to the academic board, the history department was like, "Yeah, the teacher said kick her out. We say kick her out." And the dean of students, the commandant, and the superintendent were all fans of the volleyball team because we had a winning record, and they said, "Well, that's not gonna happen.
That's
So, let's find another way to make sure that she succeeds here." So, I took world history again the following semester, and imagine having to go back and tell Steve Bannon that you failed world history.
oh, I
Like,
know.
that was a I think that was worse than actually failing the class, like,
I'm sure it
telling
was.
him
Although your story probably was, "Dad, I just told him everything you taught me, and I got an F."
well well, no, he came for parents week he and my mom came for parents weekend, and the teacher said, "Oh, she never comes in for additional instruction," which is like tutoring, 'cause I've missed class. Cause at West Point, it was like you had some classes on certain days, but it would always be like it could be one week I'd have world history Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and the next week I'd have it Tuesday, Thursday, so it was never really the same consistent days. But it always seemed like on Fridays, I would have world history and we'd have, like, a quiz or a test, and then I'd have to take it on the road with the volleyball team. Um, but it just seemed like he had a vendetta out for female athletes, and he was shocked when I took world history again and he had to guest lecture something for world history. He was shocked when he saw me in that auditorium. It's like, "Oh, Cadet Bannon. I'm surprised you're here," because he thought I was gonna get kicked out.
Didn't work, did it?
Mm-mm, but that being said, General Caslin, I guess I I became friends with his youngest son, and I don't know if he maybe didn't do the best academically and saw potential, like, saw the fighter in me back at my freshman year, um, but I stayed in contact and would always ask him military questions. I'd be like I'd send him an email and say, "Sir, what do you think about this?" Or "What should I do about this? Should I go to this school?" Or what do you think?" So, when I graduated, I'd ask him what he thought, like, what schooling wise, or I injured my back at the officer basic course, and I was supposed to go to airborne school. So I reached out. I was like, "Sir, I really need your advice. Do you think I should go? I have 2 bulging discs in my back. Do you think it's the best thing for me to be jumping out of airplanes?" And he gave me his honest opinion, and I did not end up going. Um, and I think almost every decision, like major decision in the military, I would ask my dad and General Caslin their opinions on.
Are you still in touch with him now?
I am. So
Uh,
actually
is he
he
still in?
no, he so when I was in company command at Fort Lee, I was really thinking about getting out because my dad took the job in the Trump administration or Trump campaign CEO 3 months into my company command time. So you already have, like, a target on your back as a company commander, um, and just add your dad being in the public eye
What does that
and
mean you have
ever
a target on your back as a
so, like,
company commander?
you especially the way the military has gone, so many people are so quick to be like, try and how do I put this nicely? Get your not get them in trouble, but I think the generation, at least I saw when I was in company command, had never been told no. So, you tell them no, and they'd be like, "Oh, my commander did" they were so quick to try and, like, pass off the blame for something to the company commander or to someone in power, like, "Oh, well, my commander did this," or "My platoon sergeant did this." Um, so you just had to like, you couldn't make them do more than 10 push-ups or 10 counts of some exercise. "Well, my company commander, they hazed me," or "They did this," or "They did that,"
What
like,
year was this?
2016.
Wow.
To
Very
two
f
that to 2017. So
got very
so
friendly there, didn't it?
so any of your viewers that happen to fall under my command, I was doing it to help you grow. But I would if I ever made someone do any form of physical exercise as corrective training, they thought that once the 10 count was up of something, that they could just stand up and they'd be done. And I was like, "Oh, no, no. Oh, you're done with the 10 counts of your push-ups, you can roll over and start to do the V-up." Like, it was kind of that mentality when I went to West Point, like, they're you're they're gonna break you and rebuild you, and I wasn't trying to create a soft military. I did it within the confines of what I was allowed to do, um, but given that my dad took the job as the Trump campaign CEO, so you gotta make sure that everyone basically these trainees stay alive. That was my job. Make sure that they stay alive, get to class, get trained up on their specialty so they can graduate and move on. Well, then I go to physical training. I should know what exact date he took over the campaign, but off the top of my head, I can't remember. So I go to physical training in the morning, PT, leave my phone on my desk in my office, come back. I have a missed call from a cousin that never calls me, a text message from her, and like 3 other text messages. So I call her back and she said, "Did you look at your phone?" I'm like, "No, what are you talking about?" She had sent me an article that he had taken the job as the Trump campaign CEO. So for everyone wondering, I found out when the rest of the world did that my dad took the job as the Trump campaign CEO, and then he ended up leaving the administration 3 months before I left command. So his entire time with Trump on the campaign and in the administration was during my time as company command. So most military installations have their TVs on. I'm ashamed to say a lot of them are on CNN, but I had trainees that would see my dad on the TV and be like, "Oh my gosh, is that Captain Bannon? Is that your dad?" Like, one of them I I ended up kicking out, but it had to go up to my, like, brigade commander, who's my boss's boss, and we were in the hallway because I had to go in with him and tell her why I was trying to kick him out, and he happened to see my dad on CNN before we went into her office and tried to say I was kicking him out because I was racist. Because if the TV says my dad's racist, then I must be.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah,
That goes back that's I'm gonna dovetail, we'll bookmark that, and
yeah.
I'll go back to when I first became aware of your dad because in the world that I was traveling in, it was an alternative universe, right?
Mhm, mhm,
And, I remember when, President Trump won, the night he won, I was
mhm.
sitting on the couch at home. You know, there's something you probably were taught this, the guy that trained me taught me, "Keep your tongue on the roof of your mouth. Keep your mouth closed." Okay, like, if you have your mouth open, he make fun of you, right? So and I Trump won, and I realized I was sitting there, my mouth was hanging open. I was so shocked. And I thought about the guy that trained me, and I said, "Whoop, close that mouth, a bird might fly in there." So he won, and, I was a globalist at the time. And, he started bringing this cast of characters in, Steve Bannon, Robert Lighthizer. I'm reading Robert Lighthizer's biography. Robert Lighthizer prosecuted the first anti-dumping case against the Chinese in 2004. I thought, whoa, that's not good. And then Navarro, whoa. I started reading his stuff. I said, whoa, my dog bowl is at risk now. So I sent my lawyer
Mhm.
to meet the chief strategist because we had juice in those days.
Mhm.
And Tom rolled in, and I got pictures on my phone. I'll show them to you. They're beautiful pictures. Tom comes back and he says to me, we were supposed to meet for 15 minutes and we spent 2 hours. And that Steve Bannon is so interesting. I couldn't even say, I just listened to him. It was incredible. I go, Tom, what are you doing? Anyhow, the point was that the government of the United States, if it was a Republican government, and I don't mean Republican like the party.
Mhm.
I mean, if it practiced republicanism, which it does not, it practices the post-World War II Democrat liberal order, which is a completely different kind of thing. Liberalism and republicanism are not the same thing.
Mhm.
We're supposed to be living in a republic, and in a republic, the number one goal of government is anti-corruption.
Mhm.
Number one.
Mhm.
When you're in the Democrat liberal order, the number one goal is, how does this corruption work for me? Or as one of my many mentors said to me, I'm okay with corruption as long as I'm in on it. So off we went to Washington to see what we could be doing here now. And I started this relationship through my law firm with your dad. And I started reading Navarro and listening to your dad. And I went home and told my father, who the people that listen to the podcast know this, my father was
Mhm.
a very famous academic. And that's why I have Professor Penn blew everybody's head off, because I'm not a professor, but I do come from Professor Penn, and Professor Penn was a great scholar.
Mhm.
And the first thing I said as I'm in touch with Steve Bannon, he goes, anti-Semite. I go, why do you say that? Because he just is. I go, come on, Dad. He
Mhm.
was retired, so I gave him some space.
Mhm.
But just like the racist thing, there was these media. We didn't understand in 2016 as the American people how powerful the narratives were that we were being propagandized with, or actually brainwashed with.
Mhm.
Actually, we just didn't understand it. We had some sense. I had a sense for it because I've been all around the world, but I didn't recognize the impact it was having on my parents, for example,
Mhm.
because they're my parents, right? And I spent time studying what your dad was trying to advance. And I pulled the plug on my globalism. And I do have to say, I'm probably the only asshole that did that in the entire country. Because, I turned my own dog bowl over. I said, man,
Mhm.
this is hurting the country. I'm not going to do this. And my lawyer went back and met with your dad and explained what, that we understood. And your dad said to my lawyer at the time, he goes, you mean you guys get it? Because, it's like what we're
Yeah.
still struggling with that today.
Mhm.
Getting people, which is what the podcasts are all about, is trying
Mhm.
to spread this narrative
Yep.
about republicanism.
Mhm.
The philosophy, not the party. It's two different things. Of course, my audience knows that, but there's going to be new people listening because you're here, probably because you got your own following. But I was exposed to this philosophy, and I thought it was wonderful. And then we came forward, and much like you, I've been involved in politics my entire life, but far be it for me to say I'm involved in local politics.
Mhm.
that was beneath my station because I was a globalist. I'm all good going to Washington. Hey, is that the CIA taking my picture when I walk in the embassy? I think it is, you know? Or when they call me up and they go, hey, we want you to do something for us. Would you go over here and do something? Oh, I'd love to. So I've done a lot of stuff like that, but I never really considered the local. And then in 2020,
Mhm.
I started watching War Room. And there was this very dry dude on there, Dan Schultz. And your dad had him on frequently about the precinct strategy. And this was coterminous with, you know, I thought maybe you didn't pass your math class. Okay. That'd have been more reasonable. World history, hey, you weren't studying. Okay.
Which I was, that's the thing. Math and science at West Point, oh, yes, I did struggle with, like, I didn't get the best grades in them, but world history, that was embarrassing. That was the hardest thing to come back and tell my dad. But when he went for parents' weekend and that instructor said that, and he sat me down at dinner and was like, "You don't go in for tutoring." I'm like, "Dad, he makes me feel like I'm, like, this big. Why would I go in and waste all this time, and you make me feel like the stupidest person? I can feel like the stupidest person in my room without wasting that time. Like, I don't need someone else to make me feel that way." And he understood, so he
World history. Okay, come on. I'm just good. My official story when we tell this,
is
I'm
it
not,
was like
oh, no,
math class
no, no,
or
no, no,
chemistry.
no. I'm going to say you failed because you went in there with Bannon's view of world history and it was rejected by the U.S. military.
That we can go with that, and I hold I still to this day hold records for volleyball, so
Oh, yeah. Well,
I was very focused on my
I
volleyball
get that.
career.
I get it. I get it. But in 2020, I was watching War Room, and then the election happened, and I was sitting there. I'm not bad at math. And I took Georgia, all the different counties in Georgia and all the different precincts,
Mhm.
and I was sitting there with my slide rule because, the count was delayed. And I go, oh, Trump has to win.
Yeah.
It's math. And then he lost. And I said, and then Twitter deplatformed Trump. Remember that?
On January 6th. Yeah. 6th or 7th.
Wow, that's getting to be a kind of momentous date in American history, that January 6th thing.
Mhm.
And I called that same attorney, Tom, and I said, Tom, and I can get, you have not seen me wild. Tanner, have you seen me wild? And I went wild. Yeah, I can get very emotional. A lot of my listeners like to say that I'm very calming and mellow. I can be. I'm better than I was when I was your age. But I flipped out because I watched that election go strange and I could not explain it to myself from the perspective of mathematics, statistics. It violated the natural order. Something can't be right here. And then when President Trump come off of Twitter, I
Mhm.
called Tom. I said, Tom, what do I do? And I went crazy. I went crazy. And then I almost beat him. He's my best friend. I almost beat him because we were sitting around and he's going, there's no fraud. I go, Tom,
Yeah.
we almost, and he's a lawyer. He had a really interesting way of talking about it. And I think it's valid to talk about it. When there's no rules, there's no fraud. And he took a very legalistic view about it. He said, there's, talking about Minnesota now,
Mhm.
there was no rules.
Yeah, Minnesota.
There was no rules
Mhm.
here. So how could there be any rules
Yeah.
broken? Because they removed all the rules, all of them. I mean, I got like, I don't know, 5 or 6 absentee ballots just in my mailbox. Just like another one? They could just kept mailing them out. Not applications, ballots. I'm thinking to myself, well, this is crazy. Anyhow, I went completely bizarre. And because my mother had been involved in the Democrat Party my entire life, I knew what to do. And I sucked it up and I said, I'm going to do local politics. I'm
Mhm.
going to join the Republican Party of Minnesota. And I joined after 3 months. of trying to get someone to call me back. No one would call me back. In my mind, I'm going, okay, I'm suing these people because I was already in the Bannon orb, So the guy who actually ended up calling me ended up being a friend of mine, and I like him. He was a good mentor for me. Uh, and I went into the party with the intention of serving my community through the Republican Party of Minnesota.
Mhm.
And I went in knowing the rap on it, but my natural thing is I don't prejudge stuff. So I just went in and served the party. And then one guy said to me, I was talking about politics, said to me, he says, "We don't talk about politics here." I go, "Uh, what?" He goes, "No, we don't talk about politics." He said, that's not for citizen volunteers. You're a volunteer. You're here to knock on doors, make phone calls, put on caucuses. We don't talk about politics. He was Mr. We don't do that here. He was a national committee man, by the way, at the RNC. Okay. And to this day,
You
and
don't talk about politics, but that's what you do for
oh,
work,
no,
is
no, no.
politics.
This guy's name is Alex Plekish. And I'm saying his name because he speaks openly against me. I've, I called him for a long time, Mr. We don't do that here. But he's running around just saying awful things about me. And it comes back to me, Alex, what do you think when you smile at me? This guy, this guy was a Nick. He called me before the presidential campaign heated up, and he
Mhm.
said, "Would you please join me in making sure President Trump does not get going here?" I said, "How can I do that? I'm an officer of the party. That's not my role. My role is to represent the people's interests." Well, that's not the people's interest. I said, "It's too soon to do this." National committee man with his thumb on the scale. I don't like that. In my role as a party officer, I don't want my thumb on the scale. I'm here to bring everybody in, so called rhinos. I'll bring in an atheist, a communist. I don't care if they want to learn about republicanism. We want to have a wide tent to convert people to the philosophy of republicanism.
Mhm.
That's just the way it is. And so he was, but I called my podcast for months, Mr. We don't do that here. And I was shocked by that. That was one of my three shocks. Then I had the next guy, the chair of Congressional District 3. I started trying to serve the party. And as you know, I have some charisma, I have some skills.
What?
And I started putting on a thing called the master class,
Mhm.
which nobody had ever done before, which I wanted to bring people in. It was actually secretly modeled on War Room. It was my proto Professor Penn podcast where I'd have visuals playing on the screen and music. I had a band come in. I hired a band, LaSalle Gabriel and the boys. It was great. And you know what the old people, because the average age of the Minnesota Republican Party is 462 years old. That's our average age. On the roster, we're 462 years old. And I bring in this band, and LaSalle is a Grammy winning guitar player. This guy is fantastic. He's a friend of
Mhm.
Royce's.
Mhm.
He used to come to our Saturday morning meetings, another thing that I did. And he'd play, and the people, the 462-year-old people, walk up to me, "Could you please, that music's too loud. It's too
It
loud.
hurts my ear.
It hurts my ears. Can we not do that?" I thought, wow, you people, maybe Lawrence Welk can come back from the grave. You don't even know who Lawrence Welk is. You don't either. But all the people that are in Minnesota that heard me say that are 462 years old, that flipped and they're nationalists, now they're going, "Oh, yeah, let's bring back Lawrence Welk. He's great." Anyhow, that guy, who's the chair here, and his wife was a national committee woman, he came up to me and said, "We can't do this." I go, "Why?" He said, "Why are you doing this?" "I'm doing this to get more Republicans." He said, "We don't need any more Republicans. We just need more work out of the Republicans that we have." And I said, "Why is that? I thought we were an evangelical organization."
Mhm.
I was too naive to realize that these people understand that if more people watching War Room come into the Republican Party, their tenure is over and
Mhm.
outski.
Mhm.
So I called him for a long time, Mr. We don't need any more Republicans. And apropos to your concept of your story about world history,
Mhm.
here's the third guy. This is what really radicalized my. This guy was military intelligence, and he knew me by name. I didn't even know who he was. And I'm at a table like this after an event, and we're talking about the Ukraine war,
Mhm.
and there's a bunch of civilians there. They're civilians, nice people, not very historically steeped. They also would have had a hard time with world history. And we're talking, and they're very pro war. Let's go to war with the
Mhm.
Let's beat the Russians. I said, wait a second. Wait, do y'all know anything about the history of this area? And they said, no. I said, would you like to learn it from someone who comes from the region? They go, what do you mean? I said, I'm Ukrainian. I'm a Ukrainian Jew. I know something about it in my
Mhm.
oral tradition. And I told them, did you know that the British attacked Russia in 1805? That the French attacked, Napoleon went to Moscow in 1812? That the Crimean War was in 1853, 500,000 Russians died in Russia? You know that in 1917, Russia was occupied by world powers, including the United States of America, 13,000 American gringos in Vladivostok, 1942, Operation Barbarossa, the Cold War, and now this war. There's two sides to this deal. Maybe we need to understand this history a little bit better. And this guy on my left says, oh, ladies, history doesn't matter. And I looked at him and I said, you must be military intelligence, because only an asshole from the military intelligence field would say history doesn't matter. And he looked at me and said, who are you? I go, my name's David Penn. And he got ashy and he looked back because, I was already notorious. Those are my three stooges of the
You're
Republic.
infamous.
Infamous, yes. I had my three stooges.
Mhm.
Mr. History doesn't matter, Mr. We don't do that here, and Mr. We don't need any more Republicans. And then I started this radicalized. They view me as a radical. I'm not a radical. I'm an American citizen that has different views, and it comes from the railhead of this movement, which is what's so cool about having Maureen here, because she is everybody needs to understand this. She's really an elite. She's the
I'm
chief.
not.
She's the
I'm not.
chief. She's the
I'm
chief.
not.
She's the see.
No, let's
She's
not
Bradley.
put that out there.
All right,
Not.
cancel that. She is the CEO of War Room. And that's where so many of us have come to understand our political lives differently. And that's so cool. I mean, it's just so cool. But I met your father, and then I got him after that 2020 election.
Mhm.
Just as you decided, maybe I'm not going to be a
A nurse.
nurse,
Mhm.
I decided maybe I'm not going to be an asshole.
And it's funny, like, when I was for all of those trolls that think that I didn't do anything in my life and daddy had to hire me. So after my military career, which it wasn't 20 years, but my military career, I worked for a flooring company doing logistics who happened to be very woke. I found that out a couple months into working for them, just how woke they were or liberal they were. And I wouldn't get vaccinated, and they were trying to fire me for any reason that they could because they legally could not come after me because I had a medical exemption. Besides the fact that my personal views on the vaccine, but I actually told my dad when I realized that they were trying to fire me for any other reason. I texted him and said, I think we need to sit down and talk about us working together. And he had been trying to do that since I was thinking about getting out of the army the second time. So, really quickly back to that story that we were putting a pin in when you were asking about General Caslin. So, when I was in command, my first battalion commander was very understanding, and we never talked politics, but I think that he might have been a conservative. Um, he was understanding that just because that was my dad's job on the Trump campaign and in the administration wasn't my job. Like, I was doing my job as a company commander. So, just whatever the views were two separate people. He was very protective of me, all the command team on Fort Lee wanted me to move on to the installation. They were worried that I was gonna get threats, all the things, which I did. People that wanted to hurt my dad and President Trump personally threatened me.
Military members?
No, but got my email address and were sending threatening emails to me, um, and threatening harm to my dad, but sending it to me over email, which, um, I turned it into the Criminal Investigative Division and Secret Service as well, like all the threatening emails. But
Was it from multiple sources or was from one source?
no, multiple sources.
Wow.
Um, at that point, I had to actually make my social media private because I was getting threatening stuff messages through social media as well. Um, and now I have a pub public social media, so it's fine, but at at that time, um, I really was like, I don't know." That commander, understanding. They He ended up swapping out because his time in that position was done. The 2nd commander, my dad made the Times 100 most influential people that year, and they had invited him to their event in New York City, and I had asked that new battalion commander, so my new boss, if I could go because my dad wanted me to go on his behalf. He made some snide comment and judged me, so he must have been a liberal, judged me and basically took out his personal opinions about me out, when then let me go to that, um, my basically report card for my time as a company commander, he tried to trash me on an award that I should have received. He downgraded it because of personal views about me because of who my dad was. And I have the receipts for that as well too. But at that point, I was like, If this is what leadership looks like in my branch in the military, I'm done. I'm out."
Hey, something that I think the audience would like a fatwa on.
Mhm,
U.S. Army,
mhm.
nationalist or globalist?
I think senior leaders in the military, globalist and extremely liberal. Um, I think the further down the chain you get, nationalist.
But the people running the show
So the
have a
people that
globalist worldview.
Yes, and very much part of the military industrial complex.
The racket of war.
They're people that are in senior positions, I think, are okay sending America's sons and daughters back over into foreign battlefields.
For profit.
Yes, for either their profit or to be set up for a cushy position once they
Is it
retire.
hard for you to say that?
Yes, very much
You
so.
seem a little bit uncomfortable. I mean, I don't have to take you into places that you're going to feel compromised. But a big thing that we talk about at Free People Radio, Free the People Radio, is the
Mhm,
racket of war. And we talk a lot about the business model of the country, which is slavery, drugs, and piracy. You know, slavery being debt slavery because of the debt, drugs because everybody's high or
mhm,
taking some kind of pharmacological agent.
mhm.
Piracy is war. And that's
Well,
the business model that we're living in.
um, I mean, it's extremely frustrating that senior leaders, especially in the military, aren't being held accountable for what happened in Afghanistan, that botched withdrawal, the fact that 13 service members lost their lives. Their families will have to live with that for the rest of their lives. Parents lost their children, and most of those service members that died were under the age of 21 or 20 or had just turned 21. Um, that is heartbreaking to me. I actually know a few of the families, and it breaks my heart that their children will never get to have families of their own. They won't ever get to have grandkids, because some of these were only children. So it's it breaks my heart, and the fact that senior leaders that were responsible for that aren't being held accountable and then are okay sending service members over to fight a border conflict between Russia and Ukraine. We should not. We've had units staged in the Baltics since 2014.
Because you have your own personal.
Mhm. We and for anyone listening, I know exactly what I'm talking about on that because I was over there in 2014 as part of the initial staging of equipment and personnel over there to help train up our NATO allies. We we went over to Iraq and Afghanistan and ended up training up their armies. And look how well that went. We got out of Iraq in 2011. I was part of the withdrawal out of Iraq. And oh, wait, mainstream media says we're not back in Iraq. They're lying to you. We are. We've seen it on. Funny thing, mainstream media went over and did, I forget which news station, did a whole segment on how we don't have US service members in Iraq like last week. An article by a mainstream media network that US service members were injured because of a rocket or a missile landing on the installation they're at in Iraq. So what is it? We're not over there or we are? Hate to break it to you guys, but we are. We're back in Iraq. We have US troops in Syria.
1900.
And actually,
That we know of.
one of my friends who just won his primary a couple weeks ago, Joe Kent, lost his first wife in Syria. Like we're sending service members over to these different countries to protect their countries, but we're not protecting our own country.
You know, I'm just curious. I have Mr. History Doesn't Matter.
Mhm.
When in your tenure, because, captain is a fairly significant accomplishment. It's, halfway up the ladder.
Mhm.
When you're halfway there,
Mhm.
you stay around another 10 years.
Which, I mean, I got out close to 9. I had the military not turn into the woke mess it is now. Who knows? I could still be in doing my 20, but
My
mhm,
my question is
mhm,
at your rank,
mhm,
because you were involved with other captains then, right? There's a cadre of captains,
mhm,
correct?
mhm,
That you're interacting with,
yeah,
right?
mhm.
Did you speak about world history based on your great experience at West Point? You got 2 shots at it, come on. Did you talk about what was policy and how or was that history doesn't matter, we don't do that here?
I mean, we talked about it, but I wouldn't say on an extensive
I
level.
guess to cut to the chase,
Mhm.
did you all know you were pre-positioning for an existential war with the Russians? Did you see it that way? Did you understand what was going on?
Not in all honesty, not right when I went over there, but when I came back and then I saw that my unit was gonna go back over there 2 more times for longer periods of time, that opened my eyes.
What year was that?
2014.
Okay, there was a
2014.
really, really famous debate between Mitt Romney and Barack Obama in 2012, where Romney said the major enemy of the United States is Russia.
Mhm.
And Obama belittled him. Like, man, you're living in the past. That's not reality. And actually, they were both playing a game.
Mhm.
Obama was covering up because he knew
Mhm.
what was going on.
Mhm.
And Romney, he just let the cat out of the bag.
Mhm.
They knew what they were up to.
Mm.
They all knew what they were up to. For example, Obama signed an agreement with the as our Palestinian friends call them, the Israelis, in 2015, guaranteeing the Israelis $3.5 billion in military hardware every year for 10 years. It was a $35 billion deal baked in the cake.
Mhm.
So any aid that goes to Israel is over and above a $3.5 billion transfer. And $3.5 billion, man, you and I could really make out with 3.5 billion. We could split it and we both couldn't spend it. Right? Yeah, that's a lot of money. So, you know, I have an interesting history because started traveling internationally in the night, a long time ago. So when you go to countries,
Mhm,
like I've been to India, China, Korea, Vietnam, Turkey, France, El Salvador, Mexico, Canada. When you travel around like that, a lot, right? A
mhm.
lot. Sometimes on missions, and you talk to people. World history, it depends what street corner you're standing on. We have a street corner we're standing on here. We don't even agree about our street corner.
Mhm.
We're hating on each other, right? We don't agree. But you go over and you talk to someone in another country, man, they got a car. I remember I got off the plane in India one time. That Indian cab driver, oh, he passed his world history class. This gave me a PhD in American foreign policy in Southeast Asia. And I was getting worried I wasn't going to make it to the hotel because I think, whoa, this guy wants retribution, because it was a
Yeah,
British colony, right? But I think it's interesting, and I would expect that military members would be just like members of the Republican Party. Just do what you're told. Don't think, do.
that's exactly the mindset of the military. You're trained to do, and basically orders come down from the top. And, a lot of people in powers, in position of powers in the military would give out, "This is the order," and if you got questioned, just do what you're told. You do it because I told you so. Maybe because I'm Steve Bannon's daughter, I would always be like, "But why?" Like, I would always question.
I don't know. Yeah, you could say it's Steve. I mean,
I
yeah,
wasn't
it's
that I
genetic.
wasn't that yes woman in the
Yeah, that's
military. I
just
would
you.
always question.
That's just you. Helps to have like my father was really great for me because he taught me how to think.
Mhm,
And while he was, a man of the left, he was honest about it and he was into critical thinking. So he would, he's passed, but if he would not like my politics, but he would listen to me. And there's people on the left like Noam Chomsky.
mhm,
Man, you should get Noam Chomsky on. He probably wouldn't come, but that line in there
mhm.
between the far left populists and the far right, that's a thin line.
Yeah.
And your dad's onto that. And so am I, because I come from the left. And I think your dad does too, doesn't he? Wasn't he way back in that Catholic neighborhood?
That
Weren't they all
they
Democrats?
were JFK, Democrats.
Hey, they were Democrats. That's
Way back in, but, you know, if you look at Democrats back then, they wouldn't be Democrats now. That party has gone so far to the extreme, they would be Republicans. If you look at what a Democrat was back, in the 40s and 50s, that is not a Democrat of today. And I stand by what I stand by that. And I also want to reiterate, yes, I did not pass world history the first time.
Yes, I get it. I get it. I'm just right.
However, that doesn't mean that I don't understand world history.
I'm
I
just right. I'm just
that professor had
don't
it
get
out
that
for me.
volleyball. Don't make me play volleyball. I can't
That
handle it.
professor had it out for me.
No, it's really interesting because I don't have any 8x10 glossies, and I say on the podcast I'm not a veteran, and people think I am a veteran because I was trained by veterans and I was in what you would call an affiliated organization, offshoot, and I don't know what that goes on. And I know that military members many of them are selfless, that they really are
Mhm.
serving. They feel it that way. They see it that way. I think,
And
but in our Minnesota Republican Party, I can't speak about Tennessee. I'm probably the same, but our chairman is ex-military.
mhm.
All the senior leadership, not all, that's a cognitive distortion, but many of the people in leadership in the party are ex-military. A lot of military intelligence, like Joe Frazier. Joe Frazier. Joe
Don't
Frazier,
don't
26-year naval intelligence veteran.
and I've said this before to Royce, I respect Joe Frazier's service. I respect someone that will put their life on the line for this country. I respect that. I don't have to respect Joe Frazier for anything else. The fact that he wants Ukraine Joe. He has said this numerous times that he wants the US to continue to support Ukraine because he feels like that's our duty.
Well, we're going into that war is a racket mentality that obviously reaches right down into the not down to the people that are well, it reaches all the way down to the bottom. It just changes in what its import is. Because when you get down to the bottom of the pyramid, the war fighters,
And
right? But up at the top of the pyramid, these people are requisition officers. They're writing purchase orders,
well,
right?
and you know, I kind of want to ask Joe because he always, in the debate he did with Royce, he brought up his daughter about when Royce was talking about his pronouns in his LinkedIn bio and the whole transgender and boys and keeping boys out of girls' sports. But Joe Frazier brought up his daughter. You want the US to continue to support Ukraine because you feel like that's our duty. First off, Ukraine is not a NATO ally. Might want to learn that one, Joe. But would you send your daughter, Joe? Would you send her over to a foreign battlefield?
No, but it was Tanner's daughter, right? This is
That's what bothers me is, and that's why Joe Frazier will never be a United States senator. But we have some people that are current politicians, current members of Congress and the Senate that are veterans that are okay sending sons and daughters.
Oh, there's some awful ones.
But it blows my mind. You went over there. Yes, you volunteered. How are you okay with sending someone else's
I'm
sons
pretty
and daughters,
sure
but not sending? But there's a lot of America First. There's veterans in there that will speak out against. Yes, we went over there. A lot of them went over multiple times, but they don't want what our parents had to feel. They don't want other people's parents to have to feel like I can't imagine what my parents went through when I was in Iraq. The fear that they had knowing that I might not come home. I mean, I had to have that conversation with them to go over my will before I left for Iraq. And I even said, and it was the hardest conversation I have ever had. I had to tell them if I come home in a transfer case and you see me come off the plane at Dover Air Force Base, this is what I want you to do with my remains. This is where I want to be buried. That was the hardest conversation I've had to have. Surprisingly enough, my dad fought me on it where I said I wanted to be buried.
That's cute. I have some insight in that because my best friend who has passed on, his son was a Force Recon Marine in the Battle of Fallujah. And I don't sleep very well because I have post-traumatic stress disorder caused by other things. Didn't sleep last night, as a matter of fact. Self-inflicted wound, But, we started communicating at 4 o'clock in the morning because he was looking at the news reports in country. Because a lot of times there would be transmissions of, casualty reports with names. So it was for a friend to see a friend struggle like that and go through that was really tough. I mean, he was really, but he dealt with it. And he had one son who was in the nuclear Navy and he had another son who was in the Marines. And so it was military family.
Yeah.
But he still struggled with it, and I watched it and man, and that kid, he and I are such good friends. I love that kid so much. And I know him since he's been young, before he went in. Family friends. And watching him go through. And now he's on the other side of it, and he was in for 20 years, and he wasn't riding a desk. This guy was point of the spear type of a dude, right? When I get together with him now, never has a word about it.
Yeah.
Never talks about it. I get around all these people in the GOP. Tom Emmer strides in the room. If you're a military member, ex-military member, or first responder, please stand up. And the crowd goes wild. And it's like a fifth of the people that govern the party. It's a lobby within the party.
I'd love to ask Tom Emmer if he would like to continue to send America's sons and daughters off to war and get his answer when he
Well, I think
if
every politician uh, needs to have that question put
but
to him
but when
just like that.
but when he comes into a room and says every military member and veteran stand up. Maybe if Tom Emmer and I are ever in the same room together, I'll ask.
Probably can't be arranged at this point. It'd be nice if it could.
I'll ask.
Well, one of the interesting things about the concept of republicanism, which if you vote for debt, you're not practicing the philosophy of republicanism.
Mhm.
You're practicing liberalism,
Yeah.
Keynesian economics.
Mhm.
I don't know how smart these people are. They might be really smart, or they might be dumb and just be doing what they're told. I don't know. I'm not there. I don't know them. I have met Tom Emmer. He's very intelligent. He's super charismatic, and he has a very strong following here in Minnesota. He's a great politician. He's the House Majority Whip. Obviously, he's a great politician.
Mhm.
But I don't know what the guy really knows philosophically. I know what the American people know philosophically, which is why War Room, the property that you're running,
Mhm.
is so critical. Because if the people don't know what it is they're doing,
Mhm.
then they can be led to do anything. The critical fundamental piece of republicanism is no corruption. And they're not talking about money. They're talking about the human soul, and being in debt is a corruption of the human soul. I have a bank line. I hate it. I mean, I'm enslaved. I mean, I have a good bank. I like my banker, blah, blah, blah. They're my business partners. Okay, it's great.
Mhm.
But man, there's people that don't need banks. I know what Mrs. Professor Penn says. She says, sell it all and let's just, you know, sit around and watch the grass grow. What are you doing to yourself? And that's the point, is that we have a debt society, which is really in contradiction with republicanism, the concept of it, because it's Keynesian economics, it's Keynesian liberalism.
Mhm.
We don't know that. We say we're a republic, we say we're free, but we're enslaved to debt. Okay, that's great. Really great. So when you get a great show like War Room that brings on all these great guests, and then someone like me who is educated, and I get to hear other people, because it is kind of a boomer show, I have to tell you. Most of the guests, they're my age, right? Wouldn't you? It's an older crowd, right?
No. I
Okay,
mean,
it is. It
guest
is.
guest-wise or audience-wise?
Audience wise, isn't that an older demographic?
Well,
Not really. Make me happy to hear that.
mhm. I Now you're trying to get me all caught up.
Uh,
No, I think it's a little more than 50% of our audience is the boomer generation.
Professor Penn podcast, I have nobody listening to me over the age of 55. Google gives me these great analytics, right? I have nobody listening even over 45. Everybody listening to me is 25 to 45. We want the young people.
So I think, a good portion of our audience is probably 50 or older, but we do have when we go to events, there's a lot of young people that are there that are like, someone, a family member or someone older did share it with them, and now they're like, "I tune in every day, like, I wouldn't miss the show." So I think that, yeah, maybe a little over 50% of our audience is 50 plus, but I think a good amount is younger.
Well, you know what? I retract my comment because your dad has a very young heart.
Yeah, he's not I mean, he's
So,
70, but you would have
it,
never get
oh,
plus, when
energy
I
so
when I
high.
told someone that he turned 70, last November, they're like, "What? He doesn't look 70." I said, "It's the hair."
Oh,
The Bannons have good
you show me
hair.
that. You show me that picture of him.
And my mom, the
Oh
one
man,
so
this
for
guy when he was young. Hey, this guy Steve Bannon when he was young. Well, this guy, hey, he was.
so you're gonna have to look up because 'cause you're way too young to know. this. I mean, it's older than me, but I love older movies. Um,
Oh,
though
he doesn't like movies. No, he's
no.
got a backlog of movies that the audience keeps. Hey, Tanner, have you watched The Godfather? Hey, Tanner, did you watch Casablanca? But
Oh my gosh, you haven't watched either one of the I what and so, if you look up Robert Redford and The Way We Were, my dad looks like because Robert Redford played a naval officer in The Way We Were, um, he looks like Robert Redford with a little bit, like, sandy or dirty blonde hair instead of, like, platinum blonde like Robert Redford had in that movie when my dad was in the Navy in his choker whites, and my mom, she looks like Ally McGraw
another name he doesn't know.
who was in Love Story, um, but there's a picture of the 2 of them together, and they look like Robert Redford and Ally
They
McGraw
do. You showed it
together.
to me. They're
Yeah.
fantastic. Wasn't The Way We Were? I haven't seen that for so long. Didn't that have kind of a left? Wasn't Barbara
Yeah.
Streisand in that movie? And
Uh-huh.
there was like a
She was
story,
a I think she was an anti-war protester.
kind of a leftist,
Yeah.
right?
Uh-huh.
The Way We Were.
And they didn't end up together.
Well, of course
Well, I
not.
mean, they did, but then they
Two
at the
crackheads
at the
can live.
very end,
Two
they didn't
crackheads
yeah.
can live together, but
Yeah.
not a Democrat and a
Yeah.
Republican, or a leftist and a rightist. Can't do it. Anyhow, no, I love movies. We use movies a lot because they form up our collective unconscious, and we can rely on them to inform us. Like, for example, here's a funny story. You'll like this story.
Mhm.
So President Trump just had that miraculous event in his life and the life of all of American citizens. And
Mhm.
I'm very careful what I put up because, there's very strong copyright rules. And there's things you can do and there's things you can't do.
Mhm.
So we only put up things
Mhm.
that we know we can put up. We can't monetize, but we don't monetize that way. We have our own alternative economy,
The Patriot
the
economy.
patriot economy. We might get there, we might not. Because I always forget. Like this morning driving, I said, we should really talk about the patriot economy. But then I forget. Anyhow, I digress. So there's this scene in Pulp Fiction, which is a great movie from 1994 by Quentin Tarantino, with
Mhm.
John Travolta and Samuel Jackson as main characters,
Mhm.
where someone unloads on them and they don't get hit. And Samuel Jackson's character, Jules, looks at the bullet holes and he says, "Man, that was a miracle.
Yeah.
We should be dead." And then Vincent Vega looks at him and goes, "Hey, this is a very theological conversation. We should leave or we'll be continuing it in a jail." And then they have the climax scene in the cafe where they talk about divine intervention, which is really what that movie was really all about. Pulp Fiction,
Mhm.
divine intervention. And Jules says, because Vincent says, he goes, "It's not really a miracle. I just don't see it as a miracle. Things happen." And Jules says, "You're thinking about this all wrong. It doesn't have to be what you'd call a Tahoyal miracle. It's that I felt the hand of God."
Mhm.
And it was such a great scene. And soon as I saw that event with President Trump, I said, "Well, that scene, this has been thought about before. I'm going to play this scene."
Mhm.
So I checked it, made sure I could put it up. It was all good to go. And we went to put the episode up on Tuesday night. And man, it was a dope episode. I mean, I was like in the pocket. And we were banned worldwide because the powers that be, whatever we want to call them, maybe it was just because of money. I don't know why. They had reasserted their copyright control of those scenes and they wouldn't allow it to be played. And it's a discussion of miracles.
'Cause they're trying to just like Google tried to get rid of any if you search
Well, this
for
is Google.
president
We're talking
but
about
but
Google.
if you search President Trump assassination
It's not there.
yeah.
Tanner's saying that, this has been this way since the Council of Nicaea, for anybody that's like a historical reference. You know, what
That
gets,
world history.
if, what gets included as news is, not organic. There's somebody in the edit room, someone who's the CEO of War Room says, our editorial content this week is X.
We don't do that.
No, you don't do that. Right. No, of course.
We don't
You don't
do
do that?
that.
Really? Of course you do, by who you invite on. Right?
Well, yeah, but, like
Well, that's my point. I'm
but
not
but if
saying,
something gets published
You're not deep sixing stuff. I'm
Yeah,
just
we're
saying.
not removing it from the
No,
site.
no, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that you're making decisions about who comes on, and that is, and what Tanner found out, Tanner was talking about he can't get these clips about
Mhm.
President Biden's health problems because an editor is making it unavailable.
Yeah, but there's a difference.
Go ahead.
War Room is saying, like, "Yes, we want these guests on." These editors and mainstream media are deep sixing th this stuff.
History.
You had these people on. This was out there for weeks, and now all of a sudden, it's like, "Ugh, let me just axe this from the page," so because they don't wanna they want everyone to think, all their brainwashed people to think, "Oh, I never saw that. That must have been in my head. I didn't see so and so. I didn't see Amy Klobuchar say that he's been, like, the fittest he's been ever."
I thought he wasn't fit, and when 4 years ago I looked at the guy and I said, "This
That's
guy."
that should tell you if Amy's saying that Joe Biden was fit, she's not fit for office.
Well, that would be another part of republicanism. That's corruption.
Mhm,
When you lie, your soul's corrupt. I mean, you lie to yourself, and I'm not saying I'm not corrupt.
mhm,
I am. But when you're a Republican, you have a process of redemption that can work you farther away from your corruption
mhm,
because you give over to bettering the lives of your fellow citizens.
mhm.
That's what republicanism is. And,
Yeah.
we just don't practice it. We don't understand. It's a life philosophy, like being Jewish or being Catholic.
Mhm,
But what they did was, which we've been trying to cover on the podcast, because the priests were corrupt and in association with the kings to oppress the people, as your father says, feudal serfs.
mhm,
Now we have neo feudalism, he calls it. They removed the priests and separated church and state, not to make people not religious,
mhm,
but to get the corrupt priests out of the machinery of the state
mhm.
and replace them with who? The lawyers. It worked for a few hundred years. That's run downhill too. So
Mhm,
we need, another thing I learned on War Room, a first turning is coming. We're in a fourth turning,
mhm,
which is a beautiful way about talking about the cyclicity of history,
mhm.
which is another thing. If you live a normal lifespan of, let's say, 75 years, you don't recognize. People say, geez, we've seen this before, but nobody really thinks about studying how we've seen it before. There's nothing new under the sun. Famous biblical quote. And there isn't anything new. It's just new for me. So, what the podcasts are doing, me in my tiny way, your dad in this war room, what you're doing in a global way, is trying to spread a narrative. It's a counter narrative. It's almost counter revolutionary,
Mhm,
where you're saying, no, well, that's one way of talking about things, but here's a whole other way to think about it. Like I was thinking about Joe Allen when we were talking about how information is disappearing.
mhm.
My greatest fear about AI
Mhm.
is they're just going to cleanse the world of
Yeah.
alternative histories.
Mhm.
There's so
And
much information. It's hard for, you'd have an army, you could have 1 million people working on it. They could never get through it.
mhm.
But you turn AI loose on the internet and you could completely change the nature of history.
And that's what so actually, Joe Allen and I got into it recently because that picture of Kamala Harris's campaign stop where it looks like there's thousands of people on the airfield, and then if you look at the plane, um certain spots on the plane, it looks like an empty tarmac in the reflection. So Joe and I actually got into it because I said, "It's AI, they're photoshopped in there." And we went back and forth. I thought he'd be proud that I was actually admitting that, it was AI generated. Nope, he came back at me like, "I think this is a real photo." Joe, really?
Did you ask me if he's a Kamala supporter?
No, he's a Trump supporter, but
Well, I'll tell you what, here in Minnesota, we got a lot of Minnesota Republicans running around waving Trump flags the same way. There's a part of France,
Mhm.
right? There's a part of France. Sometimes it's French, sometimes it's German. They keep both flags in the basement. When the Germans are in control, hey, it's the
Oh,
right.
no, he's not he's not a
I'm not
left.
accusing him of it. I'm talking about
He
Minnesota
he
where
d
I know.
he just didn't want me to be stubborn and get set up for failure, but
Well, that's what a friend does. But I'm commenting on
Mhm.
my
Mhm.
state. My state has a lot of people running around. Man, there's a guy named Michael Broadcorp who has trolled me, who's like, he was formerly as a staffer in our state senate.
Mhm.
He was a former deputy chair of the party. He just came out in support of Harris Waltz, and he's the former deputy chair of the party. The former deputy chair of the party. Okay, he's an American citizen. He has every right to do that.
Mhm.
But doesn't that kind of make his comments? And then there's a bunch of Republicans that say, oh, you're a man of principle.
And it should be take Kamala. Oh, Royce gives me a hard time because I'll always mispronounce her name on purpose. But anyways, take her off this ticket. Like, just let's pretend that she's not on the ticket. The residents of Minnesota know what kind of person Tim Walz is. That should alarm you if a Republican wants to support him. He's a liar. He's a coward. He abandoned soldiers going to Iraq in the Minnesota National Guard. He let Minneapolis burn in 2020. The citizens of Minneapolis abandoned them. And oh, wait, Jack Posobiec brought this up recently. Maybe he didn't call in the Minnesota National Guard to come help because he bailed on them
That's a
back
that's a
back
psychological
back
explanation. Yeah.
in 2005. And I didn't think about it that way, but when he posted it, I said, maybe you're right. Why would you let your own citizens have everything that they've worked for be destroyed? Homes, businesses be destroyed. Why would you abandon them? Oh, wait, because you're used to doing that. So why would you want someone that's abandoned your city, abandoned his soldiers? Like Maya Angelou said, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. He's shown you exactly who he is. He's a coward. So why would you want that in the White House? Take her off the ticket. She's abandoned the citizens of the United States as VP. We've had more illegal immigrants or illegal aliens come across the border since she has been in the White House. And she's all of a sudden going to secure the border. She's abandoned the citizens of the United States. Anyone in Minnesota that wants Tim Walz in the White House has to have their head examined.
Well,
Let me correct. Any Republican, because we
there
know
you go.
Democrats in here love
Right.
them in this state. Any Republican in the state of Minnesota that wants Tim Walz in the White House needs to have their head examined.
Well, my trajectory in the Republican Party is very interesting because my mother, who's still alive, and she's a leftist, and I told her I was going to go into the Republican Party. She looked at me and she said, "You're going to be a token," and I didn't really understand what she meant. And I really didn't understand her. And I questioned her. I go, "Why do you say that?" Because I was new to the party and I felt a lot of camaraderie with my fellow citizens. I hadn't done anything controversial, and everybody seemed fine with me. I seemed fine with everybody else because it's hard to piss me off, right?
Mhm.
I've been in business for so many years, and I've had so many just crazy ass things happen to me. It in politics to me is kind of these relationships. Henry Kissinger said that the reason the infighting is so great in academia is because the stakes are so small, and I kind of feel that that's how it is in some of these political organizations.
Mhm.
The stakes are so small, people go bananas. Uh, but she said I was going to be a token, and I was furious with her for saying that to me. Furious because I don't view uh, people as being racist or anti-Semitic or homophobic, generally speaking,
Mhm.
because people generally hide that. The Maya Angelou thing made me think of this because people don't go up and say, "Yeah, I don't like Jews." They don't say that.
No.
That's something they keep down deep
Mhm.
inside, right? They don't know. You don't. I don't know, and I don't assume bad things about people. I'm not judgmental. And Mrs. Professor Penn will say I've been played for a fool many times and I'm going to say to her, I'd rather be played for a fool than be a judgmental person. And when they show me, it hurts, and you move on. But my trajectory in the party in Minnesota, informed by War Room, informed by the yeah, yeah, well, here you go. But no, but informed by War Room, informed, coming out of it from a very globalist identity, and you're saying Kamala Harris abandoned the people of the United States, but she's a globalist, through and through a globalist. So all of her policies reflect globalism, and there's a lot of people that think that's correct. So, for example, my mother, she goes, "What do you like about Steve Bannon?" Well, I said, one thing I learned there that I studied was the idea of the Westphalian nation state. Whoa, for her, that's anti Semitism. I go, what? What are you talking about? And, she was, and, I went into the party, and it didn't take very long for me to start to recognize there were a lot of anti Semites in the Minnesota Republican Party, how they talked about me. That I was self-interested, I was into it for personal gain, I was a self-promoter. I started saying to people, self-promoter, isn't this politics? Aren't we supposed to sell? Aren't we a sales organization? Isn't that our method and our mission to bring people into the Republican Party? No, Mister, we don't need any more Republicans. Explain to me that we are not a sales organization. We're a secret society. Another guy told me, you can't tell people how the party works. What do you mean? Oh, that's our proprietary knowledge. I said, you mean we're a secret society? I thought we were, because this is how when you come in, you're stupid, right?
Yeah.
It's a private club run by
Got a secret handshake.
it does, okay? And it's run by ex-military, and it's globalist in its orientation, and they don't. So people used to start saying things to me like, "You're a liberal." I'm a liberal. Man, what do you mean? Because I know I'm not a liberal. You mean you think I'm a is what you're saying to me? Can we use that word? Maybe you might have to
Bleep
beat that.
it.
And then this is building up and building up, and then I start hanging around with Royce White, and I start seeing all that awful racism that surrounds him. This man is really truly. I mean, I don't say I'm the smartest guy in the room because that's always a setup.
Mhm.
But generally, I'm among the smartest people in the room, and I have a wealth of experiences. I'm educated, and I've been all over the world, and I've done real things in my life.
Mhm.
So I'm pretty clear about a lot of things.
Mhm.
And then people say he's dumb, and he actually pushes me intellectually.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the few people in my lifetime that he said stuff, and I go, "Wait a sec, stop. Can you please say that one more time? I need to think about that." I mean, he's so smart.
He's one of the most intellectuals I know.
Yeah, he's just a giant.
Hard to get that out of my mouth.
He's an intellectual.
Yeah.
He's an intellectual. And I read these comments, "You're a dumb blah, blah, blah."
Mhm.
It's like, oh my gosh.
I mean, one of his primary opponents called him a pseudo-intellectual. That's a racist statement. What are you saying? You can't be a smart man?
Right.
What are you saying, Joe?
Yeah. I mean, it's just terrible. And so I went through this thing. I know we're going to try to end kind of close to on time, but I just want to say to this audience, this thing is broken out into the open field now. I don't know what to do, but there's actually evidence, receipts
Mhm.
of the kind of profound racism that has no business at all in politics at all,
Mhm.
and particularly in the Republican Party.
Mhm.
And I want to just read something that I got sent to me by Miss Maureen Bannon because I was blocked. I didn't even know I was blocked.
I
And
knew he
this
was going with this.
and this is somebody that I've broken bread with, been out to breakfast with, never had a mean word with. I didn't say we're friends, but I didn't know we were enemies. And he goes, "I'm going to leave his name out for now, but I'll be circling back with his name after I talk to some people for guidance." Listen to this, audience. This is the kind of stuff Maureen was talking about being threatened. Okay, and maybe people won't get this, but I hope you all do, because this has no place in Republicanism. You're not a Republican if you talk like this. This is how Democrats think, okay?
Mhm.
Democrats, slave owners. That's how they think. As this is my personal acts not affiliated with the party, I feel it is my moral obligation to warn every Republican and conservative away from Royce White. His campaign is using him. David Penn and his cadre of the disenfranchised are playing you for fools and personal gain. Royce himself is not a bad person. I wish him and his supporters well. You are decent people who have been schnooked by a very bad, vindictive human. Wow.
Hold on.
Yes. Hold on for what? Did you shoot back?
No. But that wasn't the only, those were not the only tweets that person posted. Then he went on to say, I won't be held hostage by parliamentarian order. Royce participated in burning my neighborhood for fame. F you, Royce, signed a citizen of Minneapolis. This has nothing to do with party. F you, Royce. You threatened my home and my wife. You gang-tied F. The residents will not be extorted. However, and then he continues on because Royce, quote, retweeted. Then he says, tell me more about how you are going to chain the building and burn us alive. Tell me more about how we're against God. Give me another personal threat. I have your texts, D-head. But then, after all of that, he goes on to say, Royce White is not a bad person. He is being used, as are you. Speaking.
Well, was that Royce?
Yeah.
Called me too. So I guess my statement about this in closing is people have labeled War Room racist and anti-Semitic, and I've watched War Room for years, and I've never seen any evidence of it. So it's being used as a cudgel to beat on a political philosophy. I've watched Royce being labeled all kinds of different things as a cudgel by people that actually are not Republicans, because Republicans would have some people that practiced republicanism would have some dignity about the truth. They would seek the truth. So we have people in politics here in Minnesota that are not interested in the truth. They're only interested in winning. And now I am now experiencing this, and I'm not quite sure how to respond to it, because there's a bear Jew in me that could come out. That's not political. I'm not going to go there. But there needs to be a response from American citizens that limits and marginalizes people, because the American Nazi Party is right down the block. There's a party for people that hate. We don't hate. In the people that practice republicanism, we love our fellow citizens as we hope they would love us, and we don't mind if they're liberals, leftists, communists, atheists. We're going to love them because they're American citizens. And our goal, my goal, is to spread the concept of republicanism because it's good for their well-being. If you're in the Democrat liberal order, that makes a person sick. If you're in the Republican liberal order, they're both liberal political philosophies, mind you. But the Republican liberal order views human beings as spiritual entities that are to be loved, fostered, developed, educated for their well-being. But the Democrat liberal order views human beings as inventory. And we don't have the time to talk about the VA.
I guess we'll have to do another podcast
That'll
episode.
be great. Won't that be great? We can keep this up.
Well, this man wants me to change my flight, so maybe if I'm here until one more day, we
could do another one, or we could Skype Maureen in, couldn't we? We could, because I really like doing this, and I hope that the Professor Penn audience recognizes how honored and how I'm just happy to know Maureen. We've gotten to be friends. It's cool.
Yes, we have. And I know I've come back to that story like 3 times. General Chasm still is when I wanted to get out in 2016, he by name requested me to come up to West Point to work at West Point. So that was my final assignment in the Army. He retired a few months into my time up there. And then when I went down to help door knock and campaign for Anna Paulina Luna when I was still living in Virginia, on my way back up to Virginia, I stayed with General Caslin and Shelley. He's retired, and had me out there at 6 a.m. doing PT. I'm like, on vacation. I'm like, are you kidding me? But, he's my mentor, he and my dad, so. Mhm.
It's great to have you here.
Thank you.
We
I'm actually really loving Minnesota.
It's a nice place.
I know.
It's really nice.
I know.
Some of the people are nice. Some of them are anti-Semitic. Hey, you know what? Everyone can seek redemption.
I can't come back every month though, so.
Don't say can't. You never know. You never know. We might have big doings here. We don't know. Anyhow, it's great to have you here. Do you have
Thank
any
you.
final thoughts you want to share, or should we just sign off and say thanks very much? Anything else? Yeah, where
Yeah,
can people? That's a great idea.
yeah.
Thanks, Tanner.
So my final thoughts are make sure you go and watch The War Room. It's on Monday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to noon Eastern Standard Time, and then 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday through Friday. And you can go find them on Rumble, Samsung TV, Pluto, Roku, all the places, Twitter, Getter, Instagram. You can find me on Twitter, Getter at Maureen_Bannon, and also on Instagram at Real Maureen Bannon. And I am coming in very spicy. It's usually on Instagram, but in the last couple of weeks, it's very spicy on my Twitter. So
Yes, you are.
yes.
You're this is very important for the audience. I'm going to leave you with this. We're a political action community. If you follow Captain Bannon, you'll be joining the digital army, and we can give cover to American citizens that are trying to advance the idea of republicanism and human freedom. Because when you do that, when you're out on point by yourself, you can get hammered out there. And even for an experienced player like Maureen Bannon, it still doesn't feel good, does it? When you're
No.
out on point, right?
No, but I will, sometimes guest hosts on War Room don't always do their best. I will take the hit. I will provide cover for my organization. And it doesn't always feel good when people drag you on social media, but I will take that and protect my team and continue to do this day in and day out. I am hoping that I make my dad proud every day, and especially while he's a political prisoner in Danbury Correctional Facility. And I want everyone, in order to support him, to get involved. And that means getting involved at the local level. So you can help out your local candidates. We need America First candidates in office. So if that means phone bank, door knocking, doing anything you can to get America First candidates in office.
We're getting organized.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a long time. We're actually getting organized. All right, everyone. Thank you very much for joining. Look forward to seeing you again Thursday night, God willing. Maureen, thank you for coming on. We look forward to seeing you soon again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Tanner.
Thanks.